Hi, I'm Joshua Hanlon, and today I'm visiting the Suomenlinna Fortress, which is just outside the city of Helsinki, Finland. It's just a quick 15-minute ferry ride to get to the fortress, and today the fortress and the area around it is inhabited by about 1,000 people. The story of the fortress really begins with Russian aggression in the Baltic Sea, and the Russian Empire was spreading out in the 18th century and really coming into the Swedish Empire. Sweden at the time controlled all of Finland as part of their empire, and so to help defend this section of the Swedish Empire, the Swedes decided to build a fortress here at this spot just outside Helsinki. It was very helpful to them in the fact that it gave them defense of the city, but it also gave them a home port for their ships and the kind of the archipelago fleet around Helsinki that was going to fend off the Russians if they hoped to hold on to the Swedish Empire here. Now, it has a long history, so starting from there, you go into the Napoleonic Era, which is when the Russians came over and finally did take it from the Swedes. The Swedes refused to give in to Napoleon's demand that they not trade with the British during the Napoleonic Wars, and so the Russians attacked the Swedes and were able to take the fort. Then they had it for roughly about 100 years until the end of World War I, which is when the Bolshevik Revolution took place in Russia, and then you had civil war taking place in Finland as well, and finally Finland took over the fort as their own, and the Finnish government, after the Civil War ended, were able to take it over. So by that time, the fortifications had become largely useless. They were falling apart, and the guns and things were outdated, so it really wasn't used for much after that. Eventually it was just turned into an area here where people still live, and then lots of tourists. It's one of the main tourist attractions here in the Helsinki area. It's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site now as well, so it's preserved, and there's a lot of work being done here to keep it up to date and keep all of that going. There are several great museums here in the fortress area. One of them is a military museum that kind of lays out the history of the Finnish military, which is really nice. There's a World War II era submarine that's really great. You can walk around in, that's been preserved very nicely. There's also a toy museum and a few others as well. So there's definitely lots to do here on the fortress grounds. Is built over 6 islands, so there's a lot of different areas to explore. You can see how fortified it was at one time. You know, it was known as the Gibraltar of the North during the heyday, kind of when it was most defended, because of all of the weapons and artillery and everything that they had here and how well defended it was. And behind me is the Seco Submarine, which was a Finnish-built submarine that was built in 1933 for the Germans. Then 3 years later, in 1936, the Finns actually bought the submarine from the Germans and put it into their navy, and it participated in different kind of coastal practice operations until World War II. During World War II, it was a patrol ship and actually sunk a Russian freighter during the war when the Finns were fighting the Russians. Following the war, it was put out of commission because the peace treaty that was brought together at the end of the war forced all of the submarines in Finland to go out of commission, and so all of them except the one behind me were actually scrapped. But this one was saved, and in the 1970s it was restored and turned into a restored museum submarine here, which is really great because it's one of the few kind of pre-World War II submarines left in the world that you can still walk around and has been restored. So it's a really nice model of that, and it's a really good way to see what these submarines were like. It's very cramped inside, not a lot of room. It's crazy how small these ships were and what they had to deal with in the engine room. It would get incredibly hot and incredibly loud, and so the men had to deal with that when the engines were running and trying to keep that all going. It's just amazing the conditions they would put through. It was not the most fun to be a submariner during World War II. So it's a really great site, well worth visiting. If you're in Finland or the Helsinki area, I definitely encourage you to check it out. You can see some very cool cannons like the ones behind me there that were put in when the Russians kind of refortified it in the 19th century. So all sorts of fun stuff to check out here. Definitely encourage you to visit the fortress. Thanks for watching.